Hello there, welcome to the webinar. I'm Greg Brail from Apigee. I'm here with Rakesh Saha from Apigee, and we are just getting ready to get started. Thank you for your patience. If you have any questions during the webinar, please put them in the chat or put them in the Q&A, and we'll address them towards the end. That also goes for technical questions. Lily is here to help out with anything, so if you have any questions about why you have no audio or anything like that, please feel free to go to the chat or the QA. And we're just about ready to get started. So let us introduce both of ourselves. I'm Greg Brail from Apigee. I've done a number of these webinars, and I've been part of developing the Node.js support for Apigee Edge. So I'm excited to talk about it.
I'm Rakesh. I'm part of the Apigee product management team. I will be kind of helping Greg to talk about why we are including Node.js with our API platform.
Yeah, this is great. Rakesh did all the work. All I have to do is talk. So this is going to be a great webinar.
Thank you, Greg.
Okay. So here we have a few plugs for other things we do at Apigee. We of course have our Apigee channel on YouTube, where you can find all of the webinars of all of the videos we ever did, including new ones and old ones, and various stuff, product stuff, as well as completely Apigee non-product related stuff, as many of our webinars are. Today's a very product related webinar, but not all of them are like that. I'll point out that the video from this webinar, which you can't see right now because we don't yet have the technology, will be posted to YouTube within a few days, so you'll be able to actually watch this when we're done. Other thing I'll point out is our slideshare.com, where you can find the slides from all of our webinars and other public presentations we've done. Well, once again, the slides from this webinar will be on SlideShare within a few days after we're all done. And finally, something that is relatively new within Apigee, our Apigee community site, and in particular what we call Apigee Learn. Apigee Learn is a great place to go to learn about Apigee, both learning about our technology as well as to learn about all the various things we talk in here about API programs and marketing and mobile apps and SOA and all the topics we've been talking about for the couple of years. A lot of that stuff is there, but it's also a great place to go and learn about Apigee's products. We're really trying to focus on that. We've done a lot there. We've done a lot with the forums at Apigee community. We've also done a lot with Stack Overflow, which is not necessarily on this slide, but we should mention that we've been using Stack Overflow a lot to answer questions about our product online. And we have, our support team, which is an excellent global team with 24/7 coverage, has made it a priority to really take care of Stack Overflow. So on we go to our agenda. We're going to talk about a few things, but mainly we're going to talk about Node.js. For those of you who aren't familiar with Node.js, we will get, after the first section, some time to explain a little bit about what it is. But we're going to start out with why we think it's important that an API tier like Apigee Edge has the ability to use technology like Node.js to expand what it can do. Then we'll move to talking a little bit about what Node.js is and why it's important. We're going to talk about how Apigee Edge actually does this stuff. We'll have some screenshots, and we can talk about some technical details. We'll leave you with pointers to a lot of great resources, and we'll have time for questions. Okay, so we're going to get started. I'm going to turn it over to Rakesh, and he's going to talk about the expansion of the API tier.
Yeah. I think we talked about APIs in these different webinars. I think Greg leads the thought leadership in this area. And we talked about how API this API, which is very common terminology in the software design paradigm, but how it became a cornerstone for the digital enterprises. So we have seen the API tier kind of expanded its role from starting with an open API and which is followed by the Twitter and Facebook kind of API programs, but then how it became the enable the mobile applications and other applications. In the next few slides, what we'll talk about is that how API tier is becoming taking a much larger role in your enterprise to make your digital platform successful. So here, this is the first evolution of the API tier outside of the software design, where many enterprises which had a lot of digital assets and a lot of back-end services which they wanted to kind of offer to the external developers or the third-party developers, following the footstep of what Facebook or Twitter did, they exposed services through the API tier to the unknown third-party developers.
So here we're talking about sort of open APIs, public APIs, as they were sort of originally, as we talked about a few years ago at Apigee, and as I think a lot of people think that APIs and API tiers are limited to just this use case of exposing things to unknown developers and letting 1,000 flowers bloom and that sort of thing, right?
And yeah, exactly. And then the main goal of the API tier was to create a service facade of the backend services or the digital assets you have within your enterprise, and then add some developer management and developer community kind of features in that tier to kind of attract and manage and maintain your developer community for building new type of applications, new type of consumption pattern through your digital assets which you already had.
Right, and this, this kind of strategy was a great success for some customers, but it didn't, despite what we might think, it didn't take the world by storm. What actually happened is we ended up with the rise of mobile apps.
Yeah, mobile application became then another way of using the same platform, same digital assets, same services, but a more common way of using that. Obviously, the Open API continue to be there and continue to, a lot of customers of ours and also other enterprises are kind of following that. They are somewhat successful in that. Some customers has expanded that Open API program to include their partners as well. But then we also saw that one of the driving force of this API tier became these mobile applications, where the applications became like contains the presentations, interactions, all the application logics. But then your API tier, more than the service facades, it also provides some functionalities in the specific to the mobile, doing some kind of mobile security, mobile optimizations, and creating focusing more towards the how your API get consumed by the specific devices or specific mobile applications.
Right. So by sort of enabling the API, the app tier, it's not just for third-party developers. It can also be for internal developers. It can also be for internal apps.
Exactly.
It can be for partners. And this is where we at Apigee saw a real explosion in the use of APIs. It wasn't that everyone wanted to have an open API like Twitter. It was that everybody needed to have apps.
And that apps can be B2C or can be B2E or can be B2B.
Right.
And then some of those API tier then started adding some of this mobile specific functionalities like a backend as a service or app analytics, which is kind of covers that consumptions, how to understand and also facilitate how your API consumption happens in your mobile devices.
Absolutely.
But now we are kind of fast forward to the current era where we are seeing these apps and connected world is kind of proliferating everything. We are having mobile applications for everything possible for B2E, B2B, B2C kind of cases. Then you have a social applications, then you have a partner applications, then you have a connected cars which you want to talk to your enterprise services. So all of these different interactions you are doing now, the way to facilitate that and make it streamlined, we think that the API tier is kind of expanding its role again to provide that whole interaction channel for all the different applications happening outside of your enterprise firewall.
Absolutely. So I think that we see a proliferation of devices, but I think we also see here a proliferation of customization. We want to have every device has slightly different needs.
Slightly different needs, but then also share the same common logic and common pattern.
Right. And
you want to maximize your uses as well as minimize your time to market for these different new devices you want to have. If you want to have a new partner, if you want to have your business unit take the same, reuse the same kind of functionality you're already providing for your mobile, but in a slightly different way, you want to make sure that your API tier can handle that, your API tier can facilitate that kind of interactions.
And I should say that the constant between all of these are these services on the back end. Enterprise systems like SAP and Salesforce, existing business systems, databases, all of these things, almost nobody, even Apigee has legacy systems. I mean, almost nobody has nothing here. And is starting completely from scratch. Instead, what they have is the need to adapt what they already have to these new needs.
Sure, yeah, and don't forget about the business process management or SOA workflows you have already created, which now needs to be adapting to this kind of new channels or new interaction patterns, which these new different type of applications are driving. And that kind of takes the API tier to fill the gap of what you have in your backend services or your enterprise services and do some more work to kind of take that load off from that backend services. And that's why you need to kind of do more channel specific customizations in your API tier, as well as provide the application logic you want to build in your every applications. Now you are you need to centralize that in your API tier, and where else you can do that, because that's kind of becoming the single highway for all the interaction happening. And that's why you need to kind of have that API tier become also your application logic platform, as well as the channel specific customization platform. So with all this happening now, to summarize that, what we can see that now API tier is not just doing the initial thought of API management or making the API exposure functions, but it also needs to do the app consumption side as well as the API exposure, where it needs to do the adaptation of the APIs or backend services for these multi-channel applications, as well as provide the security and integration. So with this, like now, if you take an example, like your mobile application or your partner application, which is now started to talking about in REST and JSON format, but your backend services is still running in a SOAP, SAML with a .NET platform. So API tier expanding its role to bridge the gap between this, what is happening in your edge, or what's happening in your outside your enterprise firewall, and what your backend services can deliver.
So if we were to look at this sort of this API exposure stuff to the right of the slide, this is the stuff that is sort of the more traditional API management. We're going to take your enterprise systems, we're going to add a layer of security, we're going to add some traffic management, we're going to create one beautiful API for everything. And I think what you're saying is on the left, we also need adaptations for apps, and we need both.
We need both in the same platform.
Right.
And that's kind of leads to the discussions we are going to have and the new possibilities we are going to open up with the API tier, where you are building new API services, which is probably needed for your new applications or your new partners, which is your backend services never thought of providing. You are building a custom logic on top of BAS to kind of enable faster time to market for your new mobile application. You need to do API orchestrations for the new kind of interactions. You creating a new facade, you are creating, or even if you have existing applications or existing application logic, now you want to expose it to them for the different channels, or building a new big data apps based on your Hadoop or based on your analytics platform you built over time.
So these are great new things we can do with the API tier. I see some of the stuff in the chat. We will try to get to everyone's questions by the end, but sometimes it's good to address some of them early on.
Sure.
One of the questions I saw being asked was, what's the difference between an API and a web service? And the way I would put it is APIs have sort of evolved from the core web services technology of HTTP. And typically they involve a couple of characteristics. One is that they use a very simple technology stack. And so an API is not a specification. It's not a, I mean, there's typically a specification for the API, but there's not like an IETF standard that says this is an API. When we say an API, we typically mean it uses HTTP, it uses security technologies like TLS, SSL, and OAuth, typically uses JSON and sometimes XML as a data representation. And it typically uses a sort of what we're going to call a REST style of representation. And if you want to have a webinar on REST, we can do that, but it takes a couple of hours and a couple of beers. The point being that there's this sort of common set of technologies and de facto standards that have become to mean API. And there are non-technical aspects to an API. For instance, whether it's within an enterprise or outside an enterprise, an API has some sort of developer sign-on. It has developer self-service. It's not something where you've got to go to the meeting. It typically has some sort of analytics. It typically has some sort of public documentation or some way for developers who are properly authorized, which could be anyone in the world or only people who work for a specific corporation, can discover the API, sign up for it, get credentials, and get started developing. In my opinion, those are the things you have to put together to call something an API, and not just we have some data that goes over HTTP. And what we're saying in this webinar is that in addition to the traditional API management stuff of OAuth and mediation and routing and transformation and rate limiting. We're adding the ability to create a very custom experience for different clients by adding essentially the ability to run code on the API platform. And the platform we're selecting for that is Node.js, and we'll get into that. So let's talk a little bit about Node.js and why we're talking about that in particular for this particular thing. And this webinar is really specifically focused on Node.js. We can certainly talk in general about what Apigee does, but we've got a lot of great videos and webinars and demos on that elsewhere. So I want to make sure we spend a bunch of time on this webinar focusing on Node.js and why it's part of our platform. We have been looking around a bit, and what we've noticed is that obviously there's huge community building around Node.js, and we'll get to some stats on that in a little bit. And it also happens to fit very nicely with the kind of thing that we do at Apigee. The initial idea of Node.js was, wouldn't it be cool if we could build servers in JavaScript? And the original developers of Node.js said, in addition to that, wouldn't it be cool if they behaved like things behave in the browser in JavaScript, where everything is asynchronous? So you're not having to learn multi-threaded programming, instead you're dealing with events. That's a much more natural programming model for people who are not necessarily PhDs in multi-threaded programming. Side note, I think 95% of Java programmers don't actually understand multi-threaded programming. And the other 4.99999% don't really understand it, and the other 5 guys work for Google. But anyway, that's another thing. So Node.js is basically the ability to build servers in JavaScript. Everything is asynchronous. It happens to be excellent for highly concurrent applications like APIs, and it happens to be excellent for network processing. So what we saw was that this seemed like a really good way to do this, and a lot of people out there are using Node.js to solve some of these kind of mediation problems already. It's also got a ton of interest. Here's one graph that we like to show. This is just the Google search trend for Node.js. It seems like a lot of the initial interest for Node.js is happening in the web app building community. And I think that's because a lot of those guys were using, and gals, were using Ruby on Rails. And they find that Node.js has a lot of the advantages. Some of the packages and frameworks like Express have a lot of the advantages of Ruby on Rails and Sinatra, but they perform very well. And they scale very nicely, which is something that Ruby on Rails does not always do. In addition, because it's JavaScript, web developers, if they do any kind of front-end development, they already know JavaScript. So instead of learning a new programming language, they can do it in JavaScript. Nonetheless, we think that it also has a lot of applicability outside of that. And these are some of the companies right now that have made public statements about their use for Node.js. Walmart, for instance, is a poster child for Node.js, as is LinkedIn. Microsoft has contributed to the development. eBay is doing
Microsoft Azure is supporting the Node.js.
Microsoft Azure supports Node.js. I saw that IBM is starting to look at it. Okay. I haven't seen a lot of it at Google yet, but I think it's only a matter of time.
Google Apigee.
Right. Amazon has started to support it for their Elastic Beanstalk. And Rakesh pulled together some quotes from some of these guys on, basically experiences that they've had with Node.js, in particular focusing on LinkedIn and Walmart. Walmart's made a lot of noise about their use of Node.js, right?
Only one thing also I wanted to highlight here, that if you see the comments and see the users of Node.js, it's very particular about their mobile stack and the mobile platform they're building, which is they are started from scratch.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yes, absolutely. And in some cases, Walmart, for instance, has made a lot of publicity about how they ran Node.js over Black Friday and over the US holidays, and did very well. And they were very happy. Similarly, LinkedIn, able to use a lot fewer servers. I think people who are still building web apps in Java with struts and JSP and all that stuff, and there are people out there who are still doing it, are really, really looking to move to something new, and Node.js is attractive. Also in part because if you're a Java programmer, JavaScript is not a giant leap.
It's from a learning perspective.
Quite different, but at least the basic syntax is something that you'll be familiar with. So why is it special? It's special for a lot of developers because they can build a web app, and in some cases mobile app, as well as their backend in JavaScript, which is becoming one of the world's most popular programming languages, and we don't have stats, but it's growing fast. You get to use code all over the place. The other great thing about Node.js is that it does scale. Everything is asynchronous, so the issues you have in Java with not making your thread pool large enough or blocking your thread because the database is slow, you have different scalability issues in Node.js. And Java is really excellent for high performance and gets a bad rap from people who haven't paid attention in the last 10 years. But JavaScript turns out to be really excellent for these kind of concurrent apps. Also, giant community. In addition to the search trend we showed before, the number of open source packages being uploaded to NPM, which is Node's third-party open source package repository, is overwhelming. It's literally hundreds. It's over 100 per day. Now, part of this is because Node.js programmers tend to build everything in open source. They tend to build lots of little packages. Arguably, many of the 50,000 and plus packages on NPM are not complete or usable. But the amount of stuff happening there and the amount of interest in that community, it's more than like anything we've ever seen before in terms of just the sheer amount of open source energy that's going into build things for Node.js. So if you use Node.js and you need to connect to some proprietary technology or use a network protocol or parse a data format or almost anything you can think of, chances are there's something on that NPM site that either works well or that somebody's working on. Worst case, there are 10 of them and you've got to pick the one that you want. But it's really, really impressive what the community's done.
And also, like, this is something like not happened like over last 10 years or something. This 50,000 modules, like last time I was checking, in 2012,
40, right?
Yeah.
20, yeah.
In 2012 or something, it was much lesser than what we have now. So it's kind of, the growth is also very astounding. Like.
Yes. So, for a lot of these reasons, the community, the suitability for network programming, the ability that people we talk to are actually saying, oh, I'm using Node.js already. We chose at Apigee over a year ago to integrate Node.js support into our Apigee Edge product. And the reason we're doing that is because of these things I mentioned, and also the stuff Rakesh talked about at the beginning. It makes sense for the API tier to be more than just a simple proxy. It makes sense to be for the API tier to be somewhere where you can run code. A lot of these things we do in the API tier, like orchestrations and customizations, you can do by configuring our API platform. And if you don't know how to do that, I encourage you to check out some of our other videos and log in and try our product. But the fact that you can now do a lot of this in Node.js means now you have another option. So the Apigee Edge programmable API tier. What you see down on the bottom are the things that traditionally we do in the Apigee platform and have for several years now. Protocol transformation, security mediation, meaning going from SSL to non-SSL, going from OAuth to SAML, traffic management, quotas, rejecting API calls that there have been too many of, rejecting API calls that represent an app that gone out of control or is even making an attack. Mobile optimizations like transforming responses to remove data that's not relevant to the mobile app, versioning enrichment by making service callouts. All of these sorts of things are a core part of the Apigee Edge product and have been for a long time. In addition, we have lower level API services. It's really a mobile backend as a service. APIs that a mobile app can use for storing data, authentication, authorization, geolocation, push notifications, all those kinds of things. We have also had, if we move up a little bit, where it says build custom logic, since we released the current generation of the Apigee Edge platform about 1.5 years ago, we've had the ability to run scripts as part of the API processing. That scripting allows you to do things like call into custom logic, do some custom data formatting. But what it wasn't a standard programming model, and there wasn't a community of robust third-party modules behind it. So that's what we've added with Node.js. This means that you can use Node.js to build an API that runs in the Apigee platform. And that's interesting, although honestly, if that's all you want to do, there are a lot of ways that you can do that. But what it does allow you to do is to combine it with the things that our API platform already does, and it gets you all the great analytics, and it also allows you to use Node.js as part of creating a proxy or a facade in front of an existing API. So you have the option of doing that using our traditional technology of policies, XML, GUIs, adding in policies like XSLT and service callout and assign message and all that kind of stuff. You now also have the ability to write that proxy in code in Node.js develop it on your laptop or whatever machine you have. Some of us still have desktops too, and then push it up to the cloud to run an Apigee. So I think this is kind of what I just said. I mean, essentially what we're saying is we got the services, we got the apps, and in the middle we have the Apigee Edge platform, which has all these pre-built policies and facilities for traditional API management, as well as a lot of customization facilities, and the ability to access a lot of this functionality and write new code using Node.js.
Yeah, and only thing I just had to add here is that Node.js also, and along with our backend as a service we provide, as Greg mentioned, that you can build new services now. It may not be an enterprise service like a SAP or maybe a Salesforce again, but it can be a service which is you need it for tomorrow to launch your new mobile application.
Right. So let's imagine that in your organization you may have existing services. Perhaps you're in retail, and you have a product catalog, you have an order management system, and you have, I don't know, checkout. Right. You probably don't have a store location database on your mainframe. It's probably in an Excel spreadsheet somewhere. But what you can do is you can use our backend as a service capability of Apigee Edge to store that data, use our location-based services to actually keep track of that store locator. But maybe you also want to run a small amount of logic that's maybe going to mediate between your product catalog and something, and you want to have one API call from your mobile app that is going to call 3 different services in parallel.
Yeah.
You can do that with XML and configuration files, but in some cases it might be a lot easier to do by writing a little bit of Node.js code. Node.js out of the box is excellent at that kind of asynchronous orchestration, and packages that have been built on top of it, like request and async, for instance, are 2 very popular Node.js packages. Make that pretty easy. So what is Apigee Edge Node.js consist of? It runs within the Apigee product, and one thing that we're not going to spend a bit of time on is how we did it. We actually use an open source project that is something that we are the primary contributors to. It's called Trireme. It allows us to run Node.js in the same Java virtual machine as the rest of the Apigee proxy. The reason we're doing this is because we wanted to integrate it with our existing environment, which is deployed in production and on many customers' own data centers. In addition, we wanted to be able to easily combine the Node.js code with the existing services we've built within Apigee in a seamless way, and in a way that allows you to mix and match and get the best of both worlds. In addition, we've got some Node.js modules that are pure Node.js modules that will run in any Node.js environment, and we're going to talk about those in a sec. And of course, we have our existing stuff, our API infrastructure, our excellent SLA, our excellent 24/7 support. You can run it in your data center and ours. A lot of the advantages of Apigee right there. So now I'm going to take a short detour, and I'm going to talk about Volos. So the question is, what is Volos? Volos is a set of open source modules, and actually, I don't know if we have a link here. Maybe we'll add one when the webinar is over. The package, literally, you can go on NPM, or you can go on GitHub, and you can search for Volos, and you'll find it. And what Volos is it's a set of Node.js modules that are open source, that do a lot of the common API management functionality that we saw were kind of holes in what was already out there in the Node world. In particular, there's an OAuth 2.0 module, there's a quota module, and a caching module. Why those 3? Those are some of the most common things that people need in an API management platform. OAuth 2.0 has become the de facto and, in fact, IETF standard for authentication between web apps and APIs, as well as between mobile apps and APIs. Someone asked about 1.0. It's got some advantages over 1.0 because it doesn't require this complex signature computation, and plus it's a framework. It actually supports many different ways of authenticating the end user, including web browsers, username, password. It can work with 2-factor authentication. There's a lot of options there, and there are a lot of extensions being developed. So OAuth 2.0 is a really key thing there. Similarly, we've observed that most APIs that use Apigee, one of the things they need is a quota. They need to be able to say, this app is authorized to make 1,000 calls a day, that app is authorized to make 1,000,000 calls a day for free, that sort of thing. Very common in any kind of API program. Last thing is caching. We find that if we want to have this mediation tier that's going to potentially call out and create a facade for other back-end services, having a cache is very valuable. These are also great features of the Apigee platform.
Yeah, and this cache can be used for normal Node application itself.
You're absolutely right.
And someone asked for in a chat window that if Volos will require a Apigee Edge account.
Right. It is fully open source. You can use it without ever using anything from Apigee at all. It runs in two modes. There is a mode where it actually uses a Redis database, and we're happy to talk to people in the community if they want to build MySQL or Mongo or whatever. But basically where you can use Volos without any Apigee stuff. It also runs in a mode where it communicates with Apigee, which means when you deploy your Volos app to Apigee, it uses these OAuth quota and cache features, which are already part of the Apigee platform. So for instance, if you are using Apigee and you're using our API-DN functionality, which allows you to deploy your API across multiple data centers, you're going to want your quota to work across data centers. You're going to want your cache to work across data centers. You're going to want OAuth to work across data centers. So if somebody launches your app and logs in and then gets on an airplane, they're going to want it to work when they get to the other end. These are all things we do as part of Apigee Edge. When you use Volos and deploy it to Apigee Edge, it uses those Apigee services so that that's the stuff you get out of the box.
And also another thing is I'd like to add here is that also you get all the development and management functionalities. Manage your OAuth quota tokens, your cache, your quotas. Like you can create new caches, you can manage your caches visibility, and you can optimize your applications or cache uses based on those.
And you get all of our analytics when you're running on our platform. So why would you use Volos? Because I think that in particular for OAuth, which is not a simple thing to do right, we have one of the most complete, if not the most complete, open source implementations of OAuth in the Node world. Why would you run it with Apigee? Because Apigee is a great place to run your API. So for instance, it's easy to say, to do OAuth, I need people to be able to sign up for apps and get app credentials. But when you really work through that whole problem, apps are built by developers, developers are part of companies, companies might want to restrict who's allowed to work on their apps, they might want to have docs for their apps, you might want to have a developer portal to sign up for your API. All of these things are things that Apigee does already. So you can build it all yourself, or you can run that stuff in Apigee. Now, why would you use Volos for these things versus using the existing Apigee policies? And that's something that, I don't know, I'm going to go back a few slides. Because what we show here is that all of these existing policies we have here, there's already OAuth built into Apigee, there's already caching built into Apigee. You actually have two choices if you're developing on Node.js. One choice is you can write a plain old straightforward API in Node.js. You can use Express. You can use Argo, which is another open source framework from actually developers at Apigee, which is optimized for building APIs and for building API proxies. And then you can deploy that to Apigee, and you can use our existing API to add policies like rate limiting, threat detection, and OAuth to that Node.js API without changing the code. You could also use the corresponding Volos modules. Why would you use the corresponding Volos modules? Some people are more comfortable writing code than doing things in configuration. Sometimes people want to build an app that can run on Apigee and take advantage of all of our SLA and all of our value add stuff, but they might want the ability to run that outside Apigee. Maybe they're not sure about us. Maybe they want to explore their options. Maybe they want to have a local development environment. That's why we're doing this.
So that's all you mean. Like also it gives a full compatibility with there's no vendor lock-in. There's no
vendor lock-in with Volos. It's MIT licensed open source.
Great.
This is kind of getting to the end, getting to the summary, right? Why would you run this? Again, the scalable runtime, the built-in analytics, the integrated backend.
And some people asked about other Cloud9 or other kind of providers. Cloud9 is specifically a bit different than other Node.js PaaS. Cloud9, we are kind of working like a similar way, like with the different IDE providers who can also provide a deployment hook to our platform. We'll see like what comes out of that. But apart from that, I think we believe that we provide a much more stronger value proposition for running your Node applications, especially when you're focusing on building multi-channel applications or API-focused Node.js solutions rather than standard Node.js application, that probably you can run it in anywhere.
Right.
But we also provide that. But I think our value proposition will be stronger when you are looking for something building for a API exposure layer.
Right. So if you are building a brand new app and it's an API, and you want to have the things that are part of an API that's used by a large community, like self-service developer sign up and analytics and distribution, we think Apigee Edge is an excellent place to run your Node.js app. If you're building a straightforward web app, you can run on an Apigee Edge, but there are a lot of options. If you are doing a API management multi-channel strategy like we talked about, where you have to create proxies for existing services, you have to create new services, you need the mobile backend as a service capability, you need enterprise-grade SLA and cloud deployment or on-premises deployment, then we think the whole Apigee Edge product, including Node.js, is a really excellent combination and an excellent choice.
But I will argue that even if you're thinking of building just a web application or simple standalone application, that may be going to be a redundant work, because you should start with given all the multi-channel application we're seeing, I think you should start with the API first design, and where our platform to build a fast application itself will be much more valuable in the longer term.
So what you're saying is, if in 2014 you're building a web-only application, you're probably not thinking through your whole strategy. So, and here's where I may have talked about some of the stuff already, and I want to leave time for questions, but what do we do with Node.js? We inherit the infrastructure of the platform. So the existing policies in Apigee Edge, they're all there. You can use them all.
Yeah. And you get the powerful the tools and workflows you have built over for all the API related activities, and that you take advantage of that in your Node.js. Yeah, and if you are thinking through about what Greg mentioned, that you are already preparing yourself for that kind of proliferation of your application logic or your applications through this API layer.
Exactly. A couple of use cases of people who have already started to use the Node.js function within Apigee Edge. I think you can talk to some of those, right?
Let me give some high-level stats and high-level use cases we have seen with our early adopters. We came out of our beta in last month, but this is the data before that. So we saw that around 150 plus customers plus developers are using our Node.js platform along with all the API functionality we provide. There are one large retailer who are building a new backend service to kind of complement their existing backend services they have.
Right.
There's one marketing firm is building a customization capability where they are giving the Node.js based application development platform to their partners, where partners can go ahead and build some Node.js related customization logic.
Yeah.
Then one European retailer is building a new backend for their mobile applications. One marketing automation firm, they are building a new Node.js service, which is they want to expose to their internal developers and partners, which is kind of doing the federation of the data from their different cloud data sources as well as a Solar platform. And one large service provider, they are building a new mobile application logic, which also they want to share with their partners from their CRM data.
Would it be fair to say that a lot of these customers were looking at some of the traditional API management strengths of Apigee and came to Node.js on top of that? Is that where we are right now?
Exactly. And the main thing is that the main value proposition they say that they are getting out of this is that whatever they're building in the Node.js in our platform has a much more potential to reuse across their different channels.
Yes.
And that's why they chose to build it in our layer compared to their a traditional way of building their own local servers for building the Node.js application.
And the reason they selected Apigee was for a lot of the things that we traditionally talk about.
Yeah.
And so use cases, exactly, massive customization is a really interesting use case. You can actually have lots and lots of Node.js scripts running, or one Node.js program that has different modules for different customizations. Another one is access. I know there's one who was simply initially looking for access to new types of services, like they already had some proxies for HTTP services, but they needed to proxy their LDAP. was one that I heard. So there are a number of things like that.
The potential is a lot, because once you have the Node.js and that kind of programming layer, then what you can do with this 50,000 node modules available outside, or if you are building your own proprietary node module, you can connect to any of the systems and build any of the services you want.
Yep. So I'm going to move on, and then we're going to leave some time. We have a lot of questions, I see.
So what we want to kind of conclude this webinar with is that we believe that for enterprise digital transformation, the API and API fast design has to be the part of the thought process. You can't start building a new application every time you need to have another partner or another device you need to tap on.
Yep.
And building this API fast and API based design requires a new kind of platform or new infrastructure platform to build on, which is not going to be made by the traditional infrastructures like a Saha or application servers. This new tier requires kind of new customizations, modules, new ways of doing things, and Node.js is one of the very good way of achieving that. You get all the good things about the non-blocking I/O and the concurrent programming model, but in a way, it's also kind of help you to kind of build a new application without learning a new, brand new language and brand new technology. And the last thing we want to confer with, it's the Apigee Edge is a kind of combining this Node.js as a new paradigm along with it's already a web scale new infrastructure we have provided for API, and providing this new infrastructure platform for every enterprise who wants to take move into this new digital enterprise model.
Yeah, I don't have a whole lot to add to that. I think this is exactly the point, which is that we are moving to a new type of application, and it combines brand new services, brand new data with existing services and existing data, a variety of different types of clients, and we don't even know what's going to happen in the future. Thermostats will be making API calls. Who knows?
Yeah.
And what we really need to look into is how do we build those kinds of apps? So before we get to questions, we have a lot of very good information already out there. This is a part of our product. It's been a part of our product for some time now. And so that means that, if we go to the Apigee documentation, there's some great documentation on how to get started with using Node.js within Apigee Edge. We've written some blogs already. There are also, I think we might add some links later to some of the GitHub repos that have sample applications, the locations of Volos and Argo, which are some of our key open source, as well as Scott Gagnon and I did a webinar end of last year where we actually walked through and showed some demos of how to use Node.js and Apigee Edge. That webinar, those videos, and those slides are up on SlideShare and on the Apigee YouTube, as well as if you just go to blog.apigee.com and search for Node.js, you will find that and other information. So in addition to this, we've got a really great set of existing resources about how to use Node.js with Apigee.
I see a lot of questions on the chat.
Yeah, I think we should try to take some time for that.
Yeah. So one question only, the question panel is that, do you have any reference Node.js application to give out some best practices?
We have some samples. There's already a sample repo on GitHub. I think there's some more full-fledged samples coming pretty soon, actually, that we're looking at, particularly with Volos. But we do have applications. The docs should give you good links to the samples. If not, we can make sure that we include them in whatever we distribute when this is done.
One question I think which we talked about is that how we are different or complement with the other Node.js providers like
right.
Cloud9 IDs or
right.
Azure or Heroku.
Right. So Azure and Heroku are excellent platforms for running any generic Node.js app. And for instance, if you're using Heroku or Azure today, you can still use Apigee Edge as a proxy in front of those apps. And there are a lot of reasons you would do that, including all of the API management functionality we have around OAuth and developer onboarding, as well as our analytics. With that said, if you're building a Node.js app that's a multi-channel app like we discussed, you might want to consider running it on Apigee. We have a lot of those things built in, and you only have one platform to deal with.
And our customer thing, before we offer the Node.js, many of our customers chose Heroku
Yes.
or Azure to host the Node.js
EC2
application,
for that matter.
and
Yes.
then use our layer to kind of create API on top of it.
Right.
So that way we kind of complement, but as well as like now for a specific use cases, we probably also kind of competing against them.
Yep.
Another question I think we already talked about that how the Volos and Apigee Edge is related. So we kind of discussed that already. So there's one question where can I build a API prototype using Node and then later on implementing that in the backend? So probably I think this question I think meant for like how you can build a prototype quickly with a Node.js, but then decide to move to the backend.
Oh, I see. So meaning you want to mock up an API in Node.js, but the real API might be built in some other platform?
Yeah,
I mean
gets that.
That's one good use case for Node.js. You can mock up an API using a framework like Express or Argo in very little code. I love programming in Java for highly scalable server-side programming, but if I want to get an API out there really quickly, it's a lot more productive for me to use Node. You might even find once you do that that you actually want to run it in Node.js in production as well. But that's an excellent use case, right?
Yeah, and then we kind of make it very easy from the moving from that your Node.js based mock backend service to the real backend service. So that's kind of going to be pretty easy with our platform.
So I'm going from the back to the front. Is there a free developer option? Yes. Go to apigee.com and sign up. There's a free developer option to use our mobile backend as well as to use Apigee Edge and Node.js. So yes, that's an excellent, thank you for helping us plug our service. Can I write CoffeeScript? I believe you can. I don't do it myself, but my understanding is CoffeeScript basically compiles, or it's got a module where it compiles to JavaScript. So yes, you can. Someone's got a really specific technical question about app services, and I'm not sure that I know the answer to that. We're going to have to follow up with that for you online. Can we have mobile apps talk directly to a database? In theory, you can. In practice, for the same reason that people don't usually open up their databases via their firewalls to the internet because of security reasons and denial of service attack reasons and all those reasons, the vast majority of mobile apps that I'm aware of communicate via some sort of an API.
Yeah. And
that API then talks to whatever backend is necessary.
And this with the Node.js, I think it goes one step further because now there's a lot of Node modules which can connect directly to your databases. If you say like a MySQL or something like that, Mongo, those are very popular platform, popular databases for to use with your Node.js. So you can always do that now and then expose it as an API to your mobile application to connect to.
Absolutely, and that applies wherever you run your Node.js app. There are Node.js modules for MySQL and Postgres and Mongo and really everything. You could deploy any of those apps to Apigee and connect out over the internet to a database hosted elsewhere. We don't have a built-in database hosting facility in our product. What we do have is our app services backend based on the user grid open source technology, which is a great choice for building Node.js apps.
So there's one question which is very interesting. That can you walk us through a real-world example of where Node.js, where the Node.js with Apigee is used as you are explaining?
Yes.
So I think we share some of the early adopter use case. Maybe can you go back to that slide?
Yes.
So if you take a look at that, one of the example we have shared that one large service provider created a mobile application and partner application which is connecting to their CRM data. So now there are different ways of you can do it because the CRM data sometimes it is not really a consumable fashion, even if they have APIs and all, but you probably want to do some kind of customizations before you want to share with your mobile applications or your partners. And again, these different channels will require also different type of information. And Node.js along with our API tier makes it a perfect case to kind of build that kind of API and then allow this API tier to do the customizations rather than your individual applications. Yeah. So that's, I can say, another like a very real like a world example for how you can use Apigee Edge along with your Node.js, or kind of moving to a more of an API fast design for building a real world applications.
We've got enough detailed questions here. We should probably do what we sometimes do, which is do a blog post in a couple days with answers to some of them. There are a few that I wanted to make sure that I hit here. One was somebody mentioned, oh, I think that that OAuth is only good for web apps. That's really not the case. OAuth 2.0 is a very flexible authorization framework that's very commonly used for mobile apps as well as for server-to-server communication. With the base OAuth 2.0 protocol, you have the option of using usernames and passwords, or what they call two-legged OAuth, but you also have the option of connecting via a lot of the extensions that are being added to the OAuth protocol, like JSON Web Token. So OAuth 2.0 is excellent for those kinds of things as well. The advantage being that authentication tokens authenticate a particular instance of an application, which is better for analytical purposes and for security purposes. They expire. They're very big and random, so if somebody intercepts one, it's not like you can just go guessing them. 128-bit random numbers are hard to guess. So there are a lot of good things there.
One question I like to address in that, apart from like what you mentioned, that's maybe a great idea to kind of put a blog post around the use case and the real world examples of the Node.js and Apigee Edge. But there's one question which is a little bit different, where he's asking for like how you can run a Node.js natively in our platform,
right? And
there's some questions around Play and Scala experience.
Yeah, someone's already used the TypeSafe integration, which is excellent. That's like 2 weeks old as far as I know. Trireme is an open source project we developed, and the folks at TypeSafe are using it to run Node.js within their platform. Right now, I've mainly seen it used to run scripts, which is cool. I think the real interesting part is being able to embed it inside the existing JVM container to run web apps, and I'm looking forward to working with them on that as well. Within our platform, yes, we do use Trireme internally. No, for very CPU-intensive tasks, it's not as fast as native Node.js. However, you can still easily process thousands of requests per second on our platform, and we've benchmarked it to do that. And for the kinds of apps that people build that are very network intensive and take advantage of existing Apigee policies, there are actually some advantages to what we're doing, and the performance is quite good. So if you're looking to process 100,000 API calls a second, or if you're doing ray tracing in Java or in JavaScript or something, then yes, I agree, Trireme, and this is not the right platform for you. If you're looking to build multi-channel apps that proxy HTTP services and serve up APIs and communicate with database backends, I think that this platform will perform very well for you, and I hope that we could try it out for you. So does Volos do anything my existing policies don't do? From terms of a pure functionality perspective, no, not yet. What it does is it allows you to develop your API proxy or app purely in Node and to run it on any platform, including Apigee. That's the thing that it adds you.
I don't see any other question which is we haven't kind of already covered as part of others.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think let me scan through once more. One question was about like Apigee, not exactly I guess related to our Node.js offering, but how somebody can use Apigee Edge platform for consuming the APIs from the different sources. Do you
that's I mean that's and in fact there was a question up there about that. That's exactly what this is all about, right? This is the most common use case for anything at Apigee, which is I have a bunch of existing services and I want to consume them. The reason we added Node.js support was to make that sort of thing a reality and to make it something that you could do either using our own configuration or using code.
And which is kind of like talks about like how Node.js can enable API orchestration, and where it can do a scatter gather and all other similar patterns in the code itself. We also have the policies to do that, but I think code way will be much more scalable, much more maintainable than the policies.
Right. So the example is in addition, by using Node.js, we get advantage of the world of third-party Node.js modules. So, for instance, if there's already a Node.js module with an SDK for a particular service you're using that takes care of whatever authentication mechanism they use and reconnects or whatever, you can use that in the Apigee platform via NPM, which then makes your own code simpler to write.
Okay.
So there's an advantage where for these kinds of mediation issues, it may be actually easier to do.
Great. And one last question, which is about any pricing information. So Apigee Edge has a two offering, one is the Apigee developer and one is Apigee Edge, which is for enterprise with the enterprise SLA. The Apigee developer has all the functionalities of the Node.js. We talked about all the benefits, all the policies, all the API tier functionalities, which is like a free to sign, and there's no SLA, but we kind of make sure we serve you best. And then there's a Apigee Edge, which is like we kind of have a subscription model, yearly subscription model. We'll happy to talk to you. If you can contact us or our sales team. We can happy to walk you through all the commercial options.
Yep. So I think we have more questions left, but I think we should wrap it up. We've come to the top of the hour. Thank you all for attending. We do encourage you to, like we said in the links before, check out our docs, check out our site, try our service out for free. Send us questions. We'd really love to get more people involved in asking questions and being critical. That's very, very helpful. And what we'll do is we'll take all these questions here, both in the QA and the chat, and we'll cut and paste them into a blog post, and we will answer them.
Yeah. And another thing, I think, also check out our open source components.
And we'll be sure to leave some links to that as well.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks for your time.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.